there are many ways to make money as a therapist outside of the therapy room. So, some people will offer supervision, some people will have a group practice, people will maybe teach, be an adjunct professor, offer workshops, retreats, intensives. And those things I think would be considered like non-passive in quotes. And then, I think of it as like leveraged income, which might be online courses, digital workshops, social media, those sorts of things. And there's many different ways to do it, but I'm seeing a lot of people want to incorporate many streams of income into their practice, but feel maybe a little confused about how to make that happen.
This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. And welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 370 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. I'm Gordon Brewer, and so glad you've joined me in this journey, as I like to say, and looking forward to you hearing from my guest today, Kelley Stevens. Kelley is another therapist entrepreneur, and we dive in deep into talking about multiple streams of income and ways to have a sustainable income within your practice. One of the things that a lot of people find out as they go into private practice or they start their private practices is that as you get busy, as you start to get more and more clients and you really get what we like to call as full, in other words, you can't really take on any more clients, it's helpful to know how you can have other streams of income to boost your income, because truth of the matter is there's a limited number of clients, a limited amount of time that you have for seeing clients. So we dive into this. And so I'm looking forward to you hearing from Kelley's expertise. And so we'll be doing that here in a moment. But before we get to that, one of the things that I'd like to invite you to do is go over and check out the Practice Collaborative, the Practice of Therapy Collaborative. It's a membership community that started a few years ago in which we meet once a week, and it's other practice owners or people at different phases in their practice, and we just talk about our practices and talk about things that are struggles. A lot of weeks I have like a lesson that I will do on a particular topic around owning a private practice, whether it's the money side of things or whether it's marketing or SEO, those kinds of things, accepting insurance. All of those things are topics we cover over time in our membership community. So I invite you to go over and check it out. And if you'll use the promo code just winter25, you can get $15 off the monthly membership of that. So go over and check it out, practiceoftherapy.com/practice collaborative. And there should be a link in the show notes and the show summary for that as well. Also, I'd love for you to check out my friend Ashley's online store, mentalhealthwaretn.com. And if you will go over there, and if you get more than $50 worth of merchandise, you get your shipping for free. But she's got some wonderful designs that she keeps adding to and putting together just all around the topic of mental wellness, addiction recovery, and then also mental health professionals. So if you're looking for that perfect LCSW t-shirt or sweatshirt or LMFT t-shirt or sweatshirt, she's got all of those, and she can also personalize those if you'd like. So be sure and check it out, mentalhealthwaretn.com. And so as we get to my conversation with Kelley, I'd love for you to hear from one of our members of the Sightcraft Network, along with a word from our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes.
Hey there. Are you searching for answers and clarity on your mental health journey? Well, I've got the podcast just for you. Welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy, a podcast that's like having a heartfelt conversation with a trusted friend and who understands what you're going through. I'm your host, Steve Biesel, a therapist and proud member of the Sightcraft Network. Finding Your Way Through Therapy is a safe space where we openly explore the emotional complexities of mental health. From busting common myths to sharing actionable advice, we'll navigate this journey together through solo episodes as well as special guests. Discover your inner strength, resilience, and hope as we explore topics like self-care, building healthy relationships, cognitive behavioral therapy, and overcoming challenges. You'll come away with a renewed sense of self and the tools to create a life filled with fulfillment and well-being. So join me on Finding Your Way Through Therapy as we become your companion on this deeply personal journey. I am part of the Sightcraft Network and truly enjoy all the episodes. And back to your regular scheduled programming.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because TherapyNotes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving, equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. I'm so happy for you to get to know today Kelley Stevens. Welcome, Kelley.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, and as I start with everyone, tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Awesome. I'm happy to. Well, so as you said, I'm Kelley. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist here in California. I live in Southern California, which has been a crazy time here in Southern California these last few months. And I primarily work with teens, young adults, and families in my private practice. And then also my husband is a psychiatrist. So we're a mental health family over here. And then I also own a company called Private Practice Pro, where we teach therapists how to launch private practices and then also how to fill their private practices. And that's also a really fun kind of arm of what I do, and do some teaching there. So I'm excited to be here. And I think we're talking a little bit about multiple streams of income for therapists and how the industry is evolving in that way. So we're going to have a good conversation. I'm excited.
Yeah, yes. In the time that you've been in private practice, what are you seeing are kind of the big changes that are coming, or trends and that kind of thing?
So one thing I see a lot and hear a lot from my friends and the people in my programs is this idea that they want to make multiple streams of income. I also will hear people say they want to make passive income. And if anyone's listening to this, I'm making air quotes, right? Because I don't necessarily believe that there's anything as that's truly passive, right?
Right.
And certainly there are many ways to make money as a therapist outside of the therapy room. So, some people will offer supervision, some people will have a group practice, people will maybe teach, be an adjunct professor, offer workshops, retreats, intensives. And those things I think would be considered like non-passive in quotes. And then, I think of it as like leveraged income, which might be online courses, digital workshops, social media, those sorts of things. And there's many different ways to do it, but I'm seeing a lot of people want to incorporate many streams of income into their practice, but feel maybe a little confused about how to make that happen, number one. And then number two, I see a lot of people put out some sort of digital offer and spend quite a bit of money making that offer, but then not make any money selling the offer. So I don't know. Do you feel like you're seeing the same thing, something different? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things is really looking at ways to, as we just say, to diversify income.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. There is really no such thing as true passive income. I think you can put things in place around that. I think, one thing for sure is that, having a group practice is a form, and I'm using air quotes too, a form of passive income, in that that's not much, time you're having to spend seeing clients to where you can, reap the benefit of that income. But yeah, I know for me, even just in the practice of therapy, I've done, I started out doing some courses and had, some success with that. But I think online, in some degrees, we're getting a little online weary.
Yeah.
I think having gone through COVID and all of that, being in front of a screen, we want something different.
Oh, certainly. I think so too. And I think that I especially see this in relation to our clients. And so a number of my friends have created client specific resources. So what you and I do is create resources for therapists, which, obviously is supporting their businesses. And I think people are much more open to taking a course online if it's related to their business. But I do see this with clients where I'll see therapists making a beautiful digital course. And I've had friends and people who I've worked with who've made amazing resources, but then they're not getting clients to buy it. And I think a lot of that work up front comes first with really trying to figure out what it is that your target client actually is going to use. And so, if you have maybe a mom who's struggling with postpartum depression, has a new baby, is not sleeping, what is the likelihood that that mom is going to sit down for a 12-hour course on their phone?
Right.
Versus maybe they would listen to a 15-minute a day podcast, or they're, and so I think a lot of that upfront work of deciding what the resource is and whether or not the person needs it is what's missing. And I see many therapists fall into this trap that a lot of online coaches and people are saying, no, anyone can sell a course. Anyone can do this, and in many ways, I don't want to tell people, no, you can't do this. I don't want to leave them hopeless. But I think that the absolute most important part before you put out any resource, whether it's therapy, whether it's a group practice, whatever, is first determining who are you trying to get to purchase it or sign up for it. And will they use it? Like, will it work for them? And will they actually do it? Do they have the time?
Right. Well, I think to add to that is also have a lot of clarity around what problem are you going to help them solve?
Yes.
Absolutely. And how is it going to make their life easier?
Yes.
And that sort of thing. And so,
absolutely. I know. I watch a YouTube channel that I really like by a woman called, I think her name is Sunny Lanzari, or I'll send you the link and if you want to link it in your show notes. And she says something which I think about all the time, which is you need to be helping, if you're selling an online resource, not therapy in general, but just an online, helping a specific person at a specific point in their journey with a specific outcome. And I really see a lot of us therapists make that mistake where we are used to working with many different types of clients in our private practice. And so we might market digital resources to help many different types of people rather than saying, this is a resource. I keep using the like new moms because that's what I am. But we're going to solve this very specific problem for new moms. Maybe it's that they can't get their baby to sleep and it's fueling their anxiety and depression. And we're going to teach them how to help their baby sleep and coping skills for their anxiety and depression related to insomnia. And that's the only thing we're going to cover rather than all of postpartum depression as a whole or something like that.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That example was off the top of my head, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, that was a
Specific
good,
person.
that was a good example. That was a good example. Yeah. So, yeah. So as you think about diversifying income or really having multiple income sources, what are some other things that maybe are kind of outside the box things that you've discovered?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So, one thing I've done a lot of, which I think a lot of people don't think, is I've like done some work with university counseling centers, which this is funny. I don't even really talk about this online very much, but I've done things where I've partnered with university counseling centers when they have students who need a resource outside of the campus counseling center. So I know like I've done some alcohol and drug assessments. I've done things where like when the school gets in or when the student gets in trouble academically when the student gets in trouble for drinking on campus or something, they have to have an outside assessment of someone whether they're ready to go back to school. Things like that seem to be very helpful if you're not looking to build an online resource. If you're looking to do something that's just in your community and that sort of thing. If you're not, if you're saying, if somebody said to me, no, you know what, Kelley, like I want to build a following on social media and I want to build a digital resource. I'm telling people now to consider offering hybrid models. So maybe you do have some sort of online course, or maybe you have a podcast, but you have also a monthly group that goes along with it. Or because I do think that people want that person to person contact. And
Right.
I think as therapists, we want this resource that stands on its own that we don't have to maintain. I think that for the clients that many of us work with, a lot of our clients are not going to go home and just do it on their own. And having a little
Right.
scaffolding and accountability, I think, is important.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 I think the more that you can increase that kind of human to human contact is
Yeah.
gonna is much more appealing to people in
Yeah,
that sense. Yeah.
absolutely. I think so
Yeah.
too. And especially if
Yeah.
you're just starting and
Hmm.
you're just starting to sell digital products. But, the biggest piece of advice I give people a lot of times is first, if you're going to sell something digitally online, I first don't want you to start with the product. I think we all are like, I have this book in my mind, or I have this
Hmm.
course in my mind. And we have no one to sell it to besides maybe our own clients and our own private practices, which is
Hmm.
like 30 people, right? I think
Hmm.
first you build an audience. First you get to know, whether it's that you start a podcast or a YouTube channel or an Instagram or
Hmm.
TikTok or whatever you decide to do. First, build that and build it out of a willingness to serve people. Like
Hmm.
just be putting out a lot of free information and get to know who your people are online and then
Hmm.
ask them. And then because there's so many ways on social media now to say to the people who follow you or subscribe to your channel or whatever, hey, what are you needing? What is it, a book? Is it a workshop? Is it a course? What is it? And then you create out of, let's say you have 5,000 people following you and 300 of them respond, you know what I really need is a workshop. And if you had just spent 6 months creating a course, well, that's a piece of gold information. And so I usually
Yeah.
tell people start with building the audience and then give it a year and build the product afterward.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's you might be familiar with the book. It's called Will It Fly by Pat Flynn.
Yes, yes.
And that's that's exactly the principle that he kind of talks about is you build a as he calls it a base of super fans
Yeah,
that are there that follow you and that know, like, and trust you and all of that sort
yes,
of thing. And so I think
absolutely.
that's an important piece with
Totally.
all of
I mean,
this.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
So
when I put out my first digital course, one thing I did was I waited until I had 10,000 followers. And then I actually gave the first version of that course to 30 of them for free. And I
mhm,
said, I'm going to give this to you for free. I had a questionnaire. And my only thing I'm hoping that you would do is you'd tell me, like you would fill out this questionnaire and let me know how it goes. And that
mhm,
was so helpful to me because 6 months later, I refilmed the whole thing with so much more information that they
mhm,
really wanted.
right.
And, I think it's like that test, my team and I call is like proof of concept. Like we need proof of
Yeah.
concept that this is going to work before we invest our time into making it.
Right, right. Yeah, it's if you think about it, all the people that do well on, like YouTube and podcasting and that kind of thing. The other thing I would say is with the content you're putting out there is being consistent about with it. I
Yes,
mean,
absolutely.
I would say the success of this podcast is not because of me. It's because I've put it out there every week after week
Right.
I just was reminded for the last since 2017. How many years is that?
Wow.
Almost. Yeah. So I mean, yeah. And so I think that's what's helped grown this podcast is just
Absolutely.
consistency.
And
Yeah.
that's a labor of love. Podcasts are a lot of work, and that is a labor of
Hmm.
love and
Yeah.
also of service to a community of therapists. I
Yeah.
think whenever you're serving an audience, like through a podcast, uh, as somebody who puts out content every week, I know
Mm.
since 2017 until now, that is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of
Yeah.
unpaid hours that go into that.
Oh, sure. Sure. Yeah. Well, to switch gears a little bit, I mean, in thinking about building an audience, or another term for it that we use is marketing, and this
Uh-huh.
applies to I think, people in private practice.
Yeah.
What are you finding that is effective nowadays?
It's a good question. I was just chatting actually right before as I was frantically driving home from pickup with talking to one of my friends about this. And, I think when we're recording this podcast, I don't know when this is going to come out, but we're recording it right now in the weeks after the TikTok ban and the TikTok came back. And, we've seen the rise and fall of Twitter and X, and there's been so many changes in social media in the last, well, there's always changes in social media, but just in the last 6 months, it's been wild. And what I'm really telling people is two things. One, authenticity is everything. If you're just putting out content that looks like everyone else's, that's trending and whatever, those things are important. And it's really important to learn strategy of what works. However, if you don't do that with a heart and you're bringing who you are, it doesn't matter. People are not going to follow you, especially in the therapy space. That would be number one. And number two, you sure as SHIT better be building your email list, because we don't know what's happening at any given time with social media. And I know for me, I have 112,000 followers, and people will say to me, that's amazing. But that is not the good metric. That is not the metric I look for. The metric I look for is how many people are on my email list and how many people are already in my ecosystem. Because at any given time, as we've seen with Twitter, as we saw with TikTok, we don't own our audience. It can go away in a minute. So I tell people, like, we want people to know, like, and trust us by being authentic online. And then we want to very quickly, ideally, bring them into some sort of resource where we can be in contact with them, whether that's an email list, and not an email list that is selling to them constantly. Because we all get emails from Macy's and Target. Okay. Like, I get like 3 a day probably we want, information, and we want to know people are there. Like, I follow this one lawyer who, I have student loans, as many of us do. And I follow this one lawyer, and I read his emails every week that he sends it out, because they are so rich with the information that I need. And those are the types of emails that it's always my goal to write. So I could go on this, Gordon, for 3 hours.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's as you said earlier, Kelley, is give your best stuff away.
Totally.
And I think that is so true. I mean, with this podcast, just having these conversations with people week after week, well, it's just really enriching for me. But people keep coming back for that, and so
absolutely. Well, I know, I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of your podcast, and I agree with you. I think we give away 80% and we charge for 20%. It's like what I try to think of. Like, we do have to make a living, but however, if we're not of service to the people that we want to work with, then they're not coming back anymore.
Yeah. Well, Kelley, I've got to be respectful of your time. What are you working on here lately that you want people to know about?
Well, thank you. You can find me on Instagram or on my website at The Private Practice Pro. I teach therapists how to open practices and grow them. And I'm just excited to be here and be on with you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it's good to connect with you, and I'm so glad you were on the podcast. And we'll have links in the show notes and the show summary to for people to connect with you easily. So,
Thank you so much, Gordon.
well, a big thanks to Kelley for being on the podcast. And hopefully this is giving you a lot to think about and a lot to ponder, as I like to say. Be sure and check out Kelley's website at the Private Practice Pros, or the privatepracticepro.com. And again, there'll be a link here in the show notes and the show summary for you to get to that. Yeah, just a lot to think about in diversifying your income, and hopefully you've learned from our wisdom in this particular episode. Also, be sure and check out our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers, and they're who I use in my practice, and I'm absolutely thrilled with the service that we get and what that product does for us. It has a patient portal that's really second to none, and they're always adding more and more features to the platform. But be sure and check them out, practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And if you'll use the promo code just Gordon, Gordon, you can try them out for 2 months for free. And also be sure and check out the Practice of Therapy Collaborative. My tongue's getting tied there, but anyway, check them out, practiceoftherapy.com/practice collaborative. And this is the membership community that I have, and I think you can find a lot of support from that. But be sure to check it out and use that promo code just winter25, and get $15 off the monthly membership for that. So thanks again for listening to the podcast, and do take time to subscribe to the podcast or follow the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. Oh no, one of the things I do want to mention is and I need to mention this more on the podcast, we are now on YouTube. So if you want to see the video of the podcast recording, go over and check it out. You can just go over to the Psychcraft Network channel on YouTube. Yeah, and just check us out. You can Google it or YouTube it or whatever you want to call it, and check us out. It's I think sometimes it's fun to get a visual of the podcast, but we're now putting the video recordings up on YouTube. And so you can go to practiceoftherapy.com/YouTube. I'll make sure that we have that link active. So practiceoftherapy.com/YouTube, and watch the Practice of Therapy podcast on video. So take care, folks. We'll be back with you again next week with another episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.